It took over 50 years of mining to create the environmental problems at the Blackbird Mine in central Idaho. But for the last 2 years, an extensive cleanup operation has been underway. This is a progress report on that effort. The work is the result of an innovative agreement settling a lawsuit between Noranda Mining, the M.A. Hanna Company, the Alamet Corporation, and the governments of the United States and the state of Idaho. With costs that were run into the tens of millions of dollars, it was not an easy deal to reach. Getting there involved years of litigation.
The issues that arose in the context of the Blackbird Mine litigation were incredibly complex. There was a lot of money involved. There were a lot of parties.
We did some mining in the 50s and 60s to support a Cold War effort. Now here we are 40 years later facing a cleanup. Who's responsible for that? Is it the people that originally mined it? Is it the people that own it today? Should the state of Idaho clean it up? Should the taxpayer clean it up? It's a very complex issue.
The litigation itself being complex, the settlement itself reflected that.
The litigation was complex, but for the public, the benefits were simple.
There's no taxpayers' dollars involved in the cleanup. The second thing they gain is the watershed, a major watershed on the Salmon River being restored to where it has an opportunity to support beneficial uses again. So it's, from the public standpoint, it's pretty much a win-win situation.
Blackbird Mine's located 40 miles west of Salmon, Idaho, up in the Panther Creek Basin. Panther Creek is a major tributary to the Salmon River.
By air, the mine is 10 minutes from Salmon, but on the ground, the journey takes an hour and a half.
That area is a beautiful part of the state. People in the state of Idaho are very outdoors oriented. They like to get up in the mountains, they like to get up on the streams, and they really care about it. So they want to go up there and be able to see that things are being cleaned up.
The initial discovery of the property was in 1892 by an Indian who was nicknamed Indian Tom. And it's one of the few authenticated mineral discoveries, actually within the West, by a Native American. It was so far removed from any transportation, there were no roads or anything into that part of the world at the time, that they never could really do any production.
The first production at the site was done by Haynes Stellite. Operating from 1915 to 1920, they were the first to mine cobalt at the site. 7 decades later, you can still see waste dumps and tunnels from their operation.
They were one of the very first companies that used cobalt as a metallurgical product, and they were using it to make tool steel. Next we would have the Uncle Sam Mining and Milling Company that built the first mill at the property in 1938 and only operated for a couple of years after that.
The Uncle Sam mining operations left its share of waste rock as well.
The next one is the big one, and that was the Howe Sound Company, or its subdivision better known as Calera Mining Company, that actually operated the mine and did its major production from 1942 on up to 1959.
From World War II on, cobalt was considered an increasingly strategic asset by the U.S. government, originally for its use in high-speed cutting tools, and later in jet engines.
The government paid a premium to the companies that extracted the minerals as a strategic and critical mineral. So there was a premium price support program that was underway that actually made it feasible for these companies to go ahead and mine these particular products. The government essentially was buying all the cobalt they could produce. So the more they could produce, the better off they were. And it's cheaper to mine from an open pit than it is from underground. They went from just underground mining to developing of an open pit, which is known as the Blacktail Pit. The Blacktail Pit would be a major source of ore for a number of years. It would also be one of the major reasons for the environmental problems at Blackbird. In 1959, just like that, the government decided not to support the production of cobalt anymore, and they shut them down. So it just shows that without the price supports of the government, that property probably would have been in production anyway, may never have been in production as far as we know.
After a small copper operation in the early 60s, active production at Blackbird ceased in 1965. But even without federal support, rising cobalt prices in the 60s and 70s enticed 2 more firms to Blackbird. the M.A. Hanna Company in 1967, and a decade later, Noranda Mining.
Noranda's operation, which goes from 1977 up to date, and with their heyday being about 1980 when they were readying the mine for production. From 1980 on, unfortunately, all the prices of these commodities started to go in a very rapid dive downhill, and that made them change their mind a little bit.
Noranda never did operate the mine, and at the same time as cobalt's price was dropping, a new environmental awareness was rising in the United States, carrying with it much stricter legislation, and the Blackbird Mine had 4.8 million tons of waste rock and 2 million tons of tailings, leaching acid water and heavy metals into the watershed.
Much of the extraction, much of the dumping of the tailings in the streams, quite frankly, were accepted practices at the time. People didn't understand all the ramifications of doing that.
Charging that the mine had significantly contributed to the disappearance of the salmon population in the Panther Creek Basin. First the state of Idaho and then the federal government brought suit against the owners of the mine, ushering in the latest chapter in Blackbird's history.
Which would be post-1980 to date, which has been the reclamation of the past environmental problems at the site.
Prior to the 1995 agreement, Noranda had made several significant environmental improvements. In 1980, they built a water treatment plant on Blackbird Creek to treat acid mine drainage. It is capable of treating 400 gallons a minute and has been in continuous operation ever since. And because the historic tailings impoundment on the West Fork of Blackbird Creek was contaminating the watershed, Noranda built a lined diversion channel and spillway to isolate the creek from the tailings. With an inset concrete culvert to handle the normal flow, the channel is big enough for a 1 in 500 year storm. The scale and the scope of remedial action increased dramatically with the 1995 agreement. In contrast to a normal Superfund site, the settlement allowed the parties to start cleanup immediately.
Our ability to maintain schedule and do on-the-ground improvements is much faster in this unique agreement we've worked out with the Blackbird Mine site group than the normal CERCLA process.
The agreement was also unique in that the companies who were footing the bill took an active role in the cleanup.
Some of those aspects of the work that we thought could be done more efficiently by private enterprise, we agreed to implement ourselves.
So within weeks of the signing of the deal, construction was underway at the site in 3 different areas: Bucktail, Blackbird, and Meadow Creeks. In 1995, construction began on a 90-foot-high dam at the 7,100-foot elevation of Meadow Creek. The foundation was grouted 75 feet down into bedrock to prevent seepage. Construction continued through 1996. The dam will be completed in 1997. A pipeline is being built below the dam to take acid water runoff to the water treatment plant at Blackbird Creek. Waste rock is being collected and contained above the dam. At the top of the Meadow Creek drainage, structures have been completed to collect fresh water from snowmelt and summer thunder showers. That fresh water will be collected in a new concrete channel, which will flow to Blackbird Creek. Scheduled for construction in 1997, the channel will keep the fresh water from Meadow Creek from being impacted by waste rock or tailings. The Blacktail open-pit mine in the Bucktail Creek drainage basin posed an interesting challenge for the remediation engineers. It was on the wrong side of the ridge from the water treatment plant. To get wastewater over to the plant, the engineers developed an elegant solution. They created a drain at the bottom of the pit. That led into the underground mine and used the mine as a pipeline to transport acid water to be treated. Next, they filled up the pit, adding 400,000 cubic yards of waste rock in 1996 alone. In 1997, a similar dam to the one in Meadow Creek will be built at the 7,000-foot level of Bucktail Creek. At the base of the dam, a tunnel is currently being excavated through the hillside into the mine. The tunnel and the mine itself will convey acid water runoff from the dam to the water treatment plant. Lower down in Bucktail Creek, 2 sediment control dams have already been constructed for erosion and sediment protection during the period of construction. In 1997, the Blackbird Creek water treatment plant capacity will be doubled to 800 gallons per minute to handle the additional flow from the new construction. Since 1995, the area surrounding the mine's major entrance in Blackbird Creek has changed dramatically. Most of the old buildings and structures have been removed. Waste rock dumps have been reshaped and covered. The construction has already begun on a new concrete channel to isolate clean water from waste materials. In 1997, the channel will be linked with another similar channel from Meadow Creek.
We hope to complete the majority of the construction in 1997, but there will likely be some cleanup features and other small miscellaneous tasks to complete in 1998.
So I would say we're halfway there. We're on schedule, which is amazing considering all the agencies working with a private group. None of the major work has been rejected, redone, or rebuilt. The tests and the studies that have been done are proving to be fairly close to what was expected, so the quality of the work has been good. No major accidents or anything on the site, and people don't realize that this is a remote site, steep, inherently dangerous site, so they've done a good job from a standpoint of safety and accidents. And just to be fairly close on schedule with a good handle on all the activities indicates that the project management from the Blackbird Mine site group are doing a good job up there. So I'm very pleased with what has occurred up there in a short period of time.
But even after all the construction and treatment, that's just the first stage in a comprehensive plan to restore the aquatic habitat. There was a fish driving this deal.
We knew that salmon were basically the major natural resource that we were dealing with.
Not only are we looking at restoring water quality to some of the streams downstream from the mine, but we're looking at not only restoring but even making up for some of the biological losses that have occurred in that area.
By 2005, the agreement will provide for a hatchery operation, acclimation ponds, a fish trap, improvements to habitat, all in the hope of reestablishing a salmon run. But in the end, there is no guarantee the fish will return.
If you look at the salmon runs in Panther Creek, they started tapering off probably back in the 40s, and then by the 60s they were pretty much gone. And quite frankly, the mining activities did have some impact on it. But as you look at salmon issues in the Northwest, the reason we don't have salmon runs is due in most part to the hydroelectric facilities on the lower Snake. What we're trying to do is create habitat. We will be, in essence, building hotel rooms. If the fish come back, they're going to have a place to spawn and rear. We cannot guarantee that fish runs will return because there are these other components of the problem that have a far greater effect on fish populations than anything related to Panther Creek, the Blackbird Mine, or habitat in general.
But we do want to make a good home for them in case they are able to get back up the river someday.
For more information about the Blackbird Mine, please feel free to contact Noranda Mining.